Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto became the true sage of 6 paths? Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. Currently I'm 16. Still a mere genin, and yet here I am facing the very person who had just destroyed the village I loved, killed Kakashi-sensei, Shizune-chan and countless other people. Me, a mere genin, stood across from what could possibly be the strongest shinobi of all time. Well, that's if he weren't crippled, forced to use bodies as puppets and separate his abilities amongst them. I'd defeated each of those bodies. Tendo, Diva Path, Shikushodo, Animal Path, Gakido, Preta Path, Ninjendo, Human Path, Shirado, Asura Path, and the last of the 6 paths, Jigokudo, Naraka Path. To simply put, it was the hardest fight of my young life, and I have no doubt it's only going to get harder. One good thing that came out of that battle, I now know of my father, Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage, the man I'd always looked up to. Luckily, I have more up my sleeve than just Rasengan and its variations, Senin Modo, Sage Mode, and Kage Bunshin, Shadow clones. When I was just 13, Ero Sennin took me away from the village to train me, to make me stronger to defend myself and my precious people from Akatsuki and anyone else that wished to harm them. When he told me we were leaving for 2.5 years, I was excited as any growing shinobi would be, knowing they were going to be getting stronger and learning powerful jutsu. However, things went differently. Instead of training to use jutsu, I had to make my body stronger, physically. Obviously, being young, at the time, I complained, I wanted to know flashy stuff. Ero Sennin though had explained what we were going to be doing in the time I was with him. He told me had originally planned to just build my strength, speed, resilience, chakra control, taijutsu and maybe Kyuubi's chakra. I had been about to complain at the time, but thankfully before I could Ero Sennin had further explained. After Sasuke's betrayal, he had changed how he was going to train me since I had more than just Akatsuki to deal with. Instead of just those aspects of a shinobi, he had decided to fill me up with ninjutsu, to make me the best I can ever be. So for those years and the 6 months, my taijutsu was improved to the point that I could go toe-to-toe with Ero Sennin and only come away with a few bruises. It wasn't perfect at the time, but then I knew I could still improve it. My speed had increased beyond even Ero Sennin's expectations. Well, that's what he told me. I could simply vanish from one spot and appear a good distance away using my newfound speed. Ero Sennin and I had decided to call it Shunpo, Flash Step. Ninjutsu on the other hand, which is still my favorite aspect, had grown leaps and bounds. I found out my nature affinity were Futon, Wind Release, Raiden, Lightning Release, and Suiden, Water Release. However, in the time limit we had, we couldn't master each of them. Ero Sennin had recommended training with Raiden and Suiden at the time, which I had fully mastered by the time I came home. I learned, mastered and even creating some of my own jutsu in those 2.5 years. Some could be considered even S rank, which I was entirely pleased with, knowing I had created such strong jutsu. Though, Ero Sennin had told me that when we returned home that I should keep it all a secret, to only show so much. He hadn't wanted Akatsuki or anyone else to find out just how strong I really was. When I'd asked him how strong I was, he had truthfully told me I was at least mid-high A rank. In the end I agreed to only show a little of what I could do, though at times I hated it. Aside from training, I had grown in the time away from the village, becoming more of an adult. Perhaps saying it to myself sounds like I'm boasting or over-exaggerating, but either way it's true. I became more mature, looking at the world for what it was. Not the naive way I had forced myself to live due to how I had grown up under the hateful glares of the villagers. During the training trip, we had ended up in Suna, which I was happy to see Gaara after a long time. At that time though, he was just a chunin, so finding out he was Kazekage once I returned was a greater shock to me. Anyway, while in Suna I relaxed for a short time, getting to know Gaara much better, teaching him more about the world since he had been cut off from a lot in his time as a killer. In that time though, I got closer to Temari, Gaara's sister. Even back then I couldn't deny her beauty, her simple grace, and how she held herself with pride as a kunoichi even when some looked down upon them. She was never afraid to speak her mind. She was blunt, honest and deadly, a combination I like in a woman. It was at that time I had realized I had become more mature. I wasn't afraid to tell her she was beautiful like I would have been before I had left with Jiraiya. Seeing a person like Temari who didn't show too much emotion blush made more bolder, more honest and overall more confident, the very thing I needed in life. She was also the woman I had lost my virginity to. It wasn't some drunken accident, or a case of, why not? It was because I liked her and she had admitted she liked me over time. Ero Sennin and I had spent 2 weeks in Suna, or rather I did while he went of information gathering. I was 14 at the time, a young time for some to lose their virginity, I know. In the second week, Temari had told me she liked me, as more than a friend. I had been shocked that someone so beautiful would even like me, but hey, I wasn't complaining. She had gone on further explaining that she was attracted to my strength, both as a shinobi and person. To her I was the hero who saved her little brother from becoming a monster for life. I had denied her claim and told her I was no hero, but she shut me with a kiss. A kiss that had truly shut me up. Even when it ended, I wasn't proud of my mind blanking on me or my brain stopping from functioning back then. After that, we had talked about everything. Few kisses were shared once I had become more comfortable around her and kissing her very soft and sweet lips. I had explained to her that being in separate villages would make any kind of relationship difficult. After we had a talk about that, we agreed to enjoy our time together while we could, and we worry about all that later. She told me we were shinobi, we may not have long lives. I'd agreed, knowing being a Jinchuriki I may have a shorter life than anyone. On that note, she had grabbed me by my t-shirt and warned Konkuro, who was also in their manner, to not bother them and keep Gaara away before taking me to her room, locking the door where we spent all night and most of the week, having like wild animals. When I'd left at the end of the week, I'd kissed Temari with everything I had and left after promising her that we would be seeing each other again. Beforehand, I had told her that should I see her in Konoha, we would have to play dumb with each other, acting like we hadn't seen each other in years, to not let anyone know of what had happened, and to keep his possible enemies inside the village and outside in the dark. Seeing her once more in Konoha though after I'd returned had ignited that fire within me that burned for me to touch her, to taste her lips on mine and to simply ravish her on the spot if I had to. After that meeting with Tsunade, on the way out Temari had slipped me a note of where she was staying in Konoha and to meet her that night. It was torture having to wait all day to see her, but when I did, it was worth it. We'd made love all night long, and even into the morning, and yes, I mean love. Before she had left the village to go back to Suna, we'd had that talk about us. We ended up agreeing we would be together. She admitted she loved me and I too admitted I loved her. The time in Suna had helped each of us understand that, especially when we weren't with each other. Seeing her again after so long had cemented that feeling, leaving me with no doubt of how I'd felt. Yes, a long-distance relationship was difficult, more than that even, but through summons we had kept in touch after getting Gaara back. Even now, as I stand before Nagato, thinking of what to answer him with, I long to touch her. Just to simply hold her delicate fingers between mine, her blonde locks to brush against my face as we hug, kiss and lie in bed together. But no, if I want that peace, I have to make sure I survive in this hellish world that had given me so many enemies. Anyway, getting back to my true abilities. For the entire time I was back in Konoha, From Gaara's kidnapping, Asuma's death, mastering my futon, completing futon, Rasenshuriken and even Peens, no, Nagato's attack on the village, I kept my true abilities hidden. I hated lying to all of my friends, Kakashi-sensei and Yamato Taicho, especially when they helped me with my futon. I had wanted to tell them I could use 2 other elements, that I could similar jutsu to Chidori and Reikiri, but I was too afraid that if I did, then people I don't want to know may find out, like Danzo. So I had to play dumb, act like I was still stupid, despite the fact that over the time away from Konoha I had become much smarter from working on strategy. The only time I didn't play dumb was when Pa and Ma taught me how to use Senjutsu chakra. All of that I had no idea about. Ero Sennin had mentioned there were many types of chakra before, and I had believed him obviously, but I had never asked what those various chakra were. If I had, maybe I could have learned to use Senjutsu chakra before. The feel of being connected to the earth was unlike anything else. It felt pure, more pure than anything I had ever felt before. Now though, after listening to Nagato speak about his past and coming to realizations on my own, I had to show everyone who I really am, what I can do, to simply stop playing around. Maybe if I had decided to do so earlier, I could have saved the other Jinchuriki before Akatsuki got them. Shaking my head of such thoughts, I looked back up at Nagato as he continued to speak. Hai no Kuni, a mile away from Konohagakure no Sato. Secluded cave. Just by living people hurt others without realizing it. As long as people live, so too will hatred. There can be no peace in this cursed land. What Jiraiya spoke of was nothing but a fantasy. Nagato had just told Naruto, who was stood across from him, all about his past, what had made him the man he was today. Nagato had told Naruto all about his past. How he, Konan and Yahiko were all just poor orphans in Omegakure. He told him about how Jiraiya found them and had trained them in the ninja arts for 3 years. However, it ended when Jiraiya left at the end of the 3rd year. They then proceeded to start a rebellion against Hanzo and all those on his side. However, it all went down the drain when Danzo and the other 2 elders along with all his root shinobi made an alliance with Hanzo to destroy the rebels. Konoha at the time was neutral with aim during the time of the battle between the rebels and Hanzo. Naruto then realized that Danzo and the elders had performed treason behind the Hokage's back, while Sarutobi was Hokage, while his father was Hokage, and he had no doubt that Danzo was performing treason while Tsunade was in charge. The good thing to Naruto was now he could have proof against him in the form of Nagato and Konan. Nagato then explained that Danzo had taken Konan hostage and ordered one of them to kill the other or she would die. Nagato refused to kill Yahiko, but Yahiko didn't want his friends hurt, so he ended up attacking Nagato and got Nagato to stab him. Yahiko had smiled and gave Nagato one last hug before dying. Nagato had become overcome with rage and attacked the entire army that were there. He was the one who had given Danzo that scar across his eye. He had even killed Hanzo, but his legs were severely damaged. After that, Nagato had made Yahiko his first body, and then he created the Akatsuki to create peace. I lost so many more friends in battle after that. So many friends, so many people kept dying. Everyone in the land of fire crows about peace, but each mission Konoha undertakes funds the war. The people of the land of fire know they are in conflict in the war, yet they hypocritically speak of peace. The peace of the big countries is built on the sacrifices of the little countries. Now you see my reasons. Back in the village I asked you if you had a better solution, do you? Nagato asked. Naruto was silent for a moment. That may be true, he said softly as he pulled out a book with the title, The Legend of the Gutsy Ninja, and remembered Jiraiya's words. I believe the time will come when people truly understand one another. I think you're right, Naruto said, shocking Nagato. Really? Nagato asked with wide-eyed. I understand you, but I still can't forgive you, I still hate you. Then let's finish this. Nagato stated, moving to get out of the machine he was placed in. But Nagato stopped as Naruto spoke, the blonde's blue eyes fixing him with a gaze filled with so much determination it was almost frightening. That Ero Sennin believed in me, so I will believe what he believed in. Naruto stopped, his grip tightening around the spine of the book. That's my answer. Nagato's rippled eyes had gotten wider as the blonde spoke. I won't kill you. What is this boy? Konan wondered to herself, staring at the blonde in question with shock and awe. Never before had she seen so much determination in someone's eyes, well, besides Yahiko, that is. You won't kill me. Nagato turned the statement into a question, more for his benefit than anyone else's. The words repeated over in his head, and he couldn't help but wonder how such a young man could be so determined after being given the short end of the stick since the first day of his life. You will believe in what Jiraiya believed in. I see, so that's your answer. He looked at Naruto for a moment before shaking his head with incredulity. So, should we just sit here and wait for you to bring peace to the world? He asked rhetorically as he inclined his head to move forward. Give me a break. How can I believe in Jiraiya now? There's no such thing as real peace. Naruto looked up from the book. It's impossible as long as we're living in this accursed world. Then, Naruto spoke up after a moment, his sage mode still active. I will break the curse. If there's such a thing as peace, I will find it. I won't give up. Nagato's eyes had gotten wider with each word spoken before looking at the young man in bewilderment. That's, words eluded him as he tried to say what even his mind couldn't place together. Konan looked at her lifelong friend in alarm at seeing him so shocked and simply taken aback. Nagato, what's the matter? Those words, Nagato uttered, staring down at the blonde. That's right, those were lines from this. Naruto spoke low, looking down at the book in question. The first book he ever wrote. He wrote this book to change the world. At the end, he says he was inspired by a pupil of his to write this. That was you, Nagato. Nagato looked at him in further shock, his Rinnegan glowing from his emotions. What? Nagato muttered. Is this just a coincidence? Naruto hadn't finished yet though. And the name of the main character is Naruto. Nagato's wide eyes hadn't lessened in their intensity, only rose. So my name is a precious memento of him. I can't just give up on and stomp of this memento. I will become the Hokage, like my father before me. And I'll make sure there's a place for a Megakure, too. Believe in me, he almost pleaded at the end. Nagato stared at him for a moment, and for that single moment, he could have sworn he saw Yahiko's translucent figure hovering behind Naruto as if they were one in the same. We studied under the same master. I told you before that we should therefore be able to understand each other. Then, I was just joking, but now, you're an odd kid, you remind me of myself when I was younger. Nagato, Konan whispered to herself, glancing at the red-headed shinobi. I couldn't believe in what Jiraiya believed in. Or, in the man himself. A different path. In you, I can see a different future. Nagato looked up into Naruto's own startled sage eyes. I will believe in you, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto let out a breath and a weak smile as his sage mode finally ran its course and returned his eyes to their shocking blue color. Thank you, Nagato, he whispered in relief. Naruto Uzumaki. Nagato spoke, gaining the boy in question and Konan's attention. Before I die, there are a couple things I must do. I wish to give you a gift, one that will allow you to bring peace to the world, as you want to. What? Naruto questioned with a confused look. He may have gotten smarter, but at the moment he just couldn't see what Nagato meant. My eyes, the Rinnegan, will be put to better use, in your care. Nagato said, drawing a gasp from Konan while Naruto's eyes had gone wide and mouth agape. You have more potential in you than you realize. Just looking at you, I can tell you're stronger than you show or even understand. I don't understand, Naruto told him truthfully. You have power locked away within you. You are of the Namikaze clan, a clan blessed with a Kekkei Genkai, the same one that allowed your former Hokage and father, Minato Namikaze, to create the Hiraishin. Nagato informed the Uzumaki. How do you know who my father is? Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow. And I don't have a Kekkei Genkai. Like I said, your potential is locked away, within you. Most likely due to the seal holding the Kyuubi back, or the Biju itself. Nagato explained. There are more to my eyes than them being a dojutsu. In a way, they are sentient. They hold knowledge, power and the ability to bring change to the world. The Rinnegan's chakra will merge with you, travel through your body and change it to how it should be. You will most likely grow taller, your hair may change, you may gain more muscle. I don't truly know what will change in you. But I do know, it will unlock your potential, give you your true power. Naruto looked at him shocked for a moment at the ability of those eyes that were considered a myth not long ago before blinking. How would you even give me the Rinnegan? He asked, considering its power. After all, power in the right hands could be used for good. Nagato smiled down at him. I will have my Rinnegan implanted within you. It will sense your Uzumaki blood and chakra, and it will bond with your chakra network, your mind, and bring out who you really are. Uzumaki blood and chakra, Naruto questioned before blinking in shock. Then you're an Uzumaki? Yes, Nagato answered with a sad smile. We are distant relatives, at least I believe so. My family had left the Uzumaki homeland before it was destroyed and moved to Omegakure. He flinched as he felt his life leaving him, bit by bit. Anyway, back on topic. When I have my eyes transplanted within you, I will be passing along everything my Rinnegan has stored, jutsu, knowledge. You will be able to use jutsu you've never used as if you have used them before. It may get confusing for a while, but over time you will think nothing of it. The transplanting will be painful, I warn you, which is why I must have you be unconscious during the procedure. In that time, your DNA will change, your body will change to how you should look, and you will know everything I do. Naruto looked at Nagato for a moment. Say I agree to have this done, then, will I have to go out and find some dead bodies to share the power I'll possess? He questioned, not wanting to go that far for power. No, Nagato chuckled, shaking his head. I had to do that because when I first used my Rinnegan I used a technique my body wasn't ready for. It left me crippled, unable to use the full capabilities. I was forced to gather bodies, implant part of my power and giving them the Rinnegan to share and split it amongst 6 bodies. You however, have the healing capabilities of a true Uzumaki, the speed of the Namikaze, and you are more powerful than me even now. Should you accept this power, you will be able to use its full powers, adding in your almost unlimited chakra supply, you will be able to do so much more with it. Your healing abilities will affect the transplantation though, for a short while the Rinnegan will stay permanent, but your healing ability will return them to your original blue ones, allowing you to still use your Sennin Moto and the Rinnegan itself like an Uchiha would use his Sharingan. I wish I could explain more, and teach someone like you along the way, but, everything I know, you will soon know. Conan stood off to the side slightly, looking at Nagato with nothing but shock, sadness and pride at having him back to how he used to be, though she knew it would only be a short time. Looking at Naruto, she noticed the determination mixed with anxiety and wariness. If she was correct, she could also see hesitance in accepting the power. Naruto heaved out a huge sigh. I see, and what about this Kekkei Genkai I was supposed to have gained from my father's side of the family? He knew he could have asked if the man knew who his mother could be since he was also from the Uzumaki clan, but it would most likely be futile. Ero Sennin had told him bits and pieces of his mother but never a name. He had told him how they had a long life expectancy, large chakra reserves, the largest of any clan possible and tremendous healing capabilities. It explained a lot actually when he had thought about it. Nagato smiled at the young, happy he was considering taking his power that he wished to give the young man. That, you will learn once you accept this power. I'm not holding the information back as a means to force you to accept my gift, but if I look for that information stored with the Rinnegan's knowledge base, it will use the chakra I need for what I must do. Naruto nodded before he blinked at his fellow Uzumaki. Rinnegan's knowledge base, he questioned with curiosity, though he had a pretty good idea what he meant. Yes, that is the place these eyes store information, words from a book, jutsu, taijutsu styles, even the amount of raindrops you may see fall. Nagato answered. Now, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, will you accept this gift I offer you? Naruto looked down at the book in his hands and instantly knew he had to take the power. While yes, it was a dangerous dojutsu, it was only dangerous to the bearers, enemies, and in this case, it would be Naruto's enemies, namely the Akatsuki and Sasuke Uchiha. He could protect his precious people, especially Temari, with power like that. Looking back at Nagato, he gave a curt nod. I accept. Nagato gave a nod and a smile filled with relief. There is one more thing I wish to give to you, something I have always kept with me. He gave a nod to Konan as he spoke to her. Unseal the weapon, it's time someone finally used it. Konan looked up at him in shock. Are you sure, Nagato? It's been in your family for generations. Naruto looked between the two in confusion. Generations? So it's a family item? He asked with a raised eyebrow. Yes, I'm sure, Konan. Nagato assured his friend with a nod. Turning to Naruto, he gave a nod. Yes, it had been passed through my family generations after generations. It is a weapon from the Uzumaki clan, in other words, and there was little information on it as it had been forged in the era that the Rakuto Sennin was alive. It is known as a Zanpakuto, Soul Slayer. Like many other weapons, it is also sentient. It will only allow those with great strength wield it. So far, there have been none. Its true name isn't even known. I hope that you are able to wield it to its true potential. He explained of the ancient blade. Naruto was riveted by the information, a weapon from his clan, a powerful one at that, being given to him. God, he hoped he could use its power, he hoped it would accept him as its wielder. Konan sighed and reached into a back pocket, pulling out a scroll with a clip on it. Flicking the clip, she knelt to the floor and rolled it out along the ground. On the scroll, the kanji for Zanpakuto was inscribed along it. Biting her thumb to draw blood, she swiped it along the seal, and one poof of smoke later and a sword appeared on top of it. The sword was a work of beauty. It looked like a normal katana with the exception of the guard, which was in the shape of a four-pointed bronze-colored star. Its hilt was light blue and beside it was a dark blue sheath. It's beautiful, Naruto whispered, transfixed by the sword that looked as if it had just been forged. That it is, Nagato commented as he gazed at the weapon. Konan gently picked the sword up and slid it into its sheath with a click, before standing up, holding the sword across her hands. Walking across to Naruto, she held the sword out with a frown. In a way it was like losing a piece of Nagato she always kept. Naruto hesitantly held out his hands to grasp the sword, pulling it from the blue-haired woman's grasp. Sliding his hand along the sheath, he grasped the hilt and gasped as a word, or a name whispered through his mind. Hiranmaru, is that your name? He questioned to it. He had been told by Jiraiya and even read up on sentient weapons and how they sometimes held some sort of life or soul within them. However, there was no answer from the sword, forcing him shake his head clear before looking into the proud eyes of Nagato and odd ones of Konan, who had moved back to the side of her friend. So, what now? He asked, grateful for what Nagato was giving beyond words. Now, Nagato mused. We will place you unconscious and start the procedure. Don't worry about returning to Konoha too late. This will take at least 5 minutes with Conan's skills and then a couple minutes to bandage your eyes, and your healing abilities will kick in straight away. Hopefully, it will only take about 30 minutes. Naruto-kun. They all heard an unfamiliar voice, though to Naruto it was familiar, causing him to jump, having forgotten about his extra passenger. He looked on his shoulder to see Katsuyu slither up to it and look at him. "What shall I tell your friends?" she asked politely. "Oh, Katsuyu, I almost forgot you were here," Naruto exclaimed with wide eyes before taking a deep breath. Tell them I'll be back soon and to not worry." He almost grimaced at what he'd said, telling people like Sakura-chan not to worry when he had gone off to God knows where was like asking them to panic. Katsuyu looked at him for a moment, scrutinizing him and hoping he was making the right decision by taking the power of the Rinnegan. Though even she knew how much it could help Naruto. "All right, I hope you know what you're doing. For Tsunade-sama's sake," the little slug told him, getting a small smile in return. "I do." He gave a nod to the slug queen. Naruto sighed and gave a nod to Nagato about what he'd said before. Katsuyu reminded him she was still there, praying everything went fine. "All right, let's do this." He trailed off as he felt a prick in his neck, his vision went blurry, his speech went slurred, and he couldn't find the strength to stand. The last thing he saw was heading to the ground before everything went black. Conan pulled the needle from his neck and quickly caught him before he struck the ground. "Got ya," she whispered, lowering the future Rinnegan wielder to the ground, "the only hope the world will have for a savior." Nagato smiled sadly as he watched Conan place the young Uzumaki on his back and brush his hair back before untying his headband and placing it beside him. He knew it couldn't be easy on Conan, knowing he was about to die from using Chibaku Tensei in a weakened state and what he would be doing in a few moments. However, he couldn't. No, he wouldn't trust anyone else to perform such a delicate surgery on him to transplant his eyes into Naruto's sockets. "You will be a force to be reckoned with, Naruto Uzumaki. With the Rinnegan, your true power, the Namikaze Kekkei Genkei, that Zanpakuto, and also the power placed within you by Itachi Uchiha, you will give birth to a dojutsu unlike any other someday in the future, and you will use it to bring peace to the land." Coughing up some blood, he looked up into Conan's concerned eyes. "Nagato, do you have to do this?" she asked, biting her lip to stop her emotions from jumping out. "After everything I've done, this is all I can do to repent for my mistakes." He looked down at his fellow clan member. "This is all I can do, to give Naruto-kun the power to protect his future and the world's future. He will give birth to a new era, one of peace. The least I can do right now is to give him the power and the hope he needs to make those dreams into reality." He placed his hands in a seal. "Help him back to Konoha. When this is over, he will most likely go into a coma for a couple days to gather the information within the Rinnegan and use that time to look through everything." "What about Madara?" Conan asked, accepting her mission. Nagato's eyes narrowed at the name. "He will be looking for my corpse to take my eyes, no doubt." "Forget about him, protect Naruto. If Madara finds out what has happened here, I don't know what Madara will do to get these eyes. Though, I wouldn't be surprised if he had some way to receive a Rinnegan eye." "Understood," Conan asked shortly before closing her eyes as Nagato's chakra spiked. Well, what he had left. Geto. Rinne Tensei no Jutsu. Outer Path. Samsara of Heavenly Life Technique. Kanahagakure no Sato. Everyone was starting to collect all the corpses of people killed in the invasion and placing them all at the same part of the village when all of a sudden a massive poof of smoke rose up from the center of the village. When the smoke cleared, it displayed the outer path in all its glory. What's going on? Ino asked, slightly scared. Did Naruto lose? Shikamaru asked, worried himself. They hadn't heard of anything in a while now and the people were getting anxious of what may have happened. No, Shino's monotone voice broke through the whispers of the younger generation. Quote. Look. They all looked at the creatures as its mouth opened up to impossible lengths and thousands of green tendrils burst from its gaping maw. Each tendril struck a corpse, making everyone back away in alarm and caution, not knowing what to expect. He's bringing them back, Inoichi said, feeling a warmth spread throughout a body he was about to pick up. What? Shikaku asked, looking over at his lifelong friend. He's right, Sakura exclaimed in shock as she held Shizune's hand that was getting warmer. That thing, it's bringing them all back. But, why would pain do that? Hiba asked, stroking Akamaru's back out of habit. Sakura smiled to herself, knowing just why someone who had just destroyed their home and killed many people would suddenly bring everyone back to life. Because he was changed by Naruto's power to bring out the good in someone and change their views. She told them, almost wanting to laugh out of sheer joy. It meant Naruto was alive. He had convinced pain to do good. She just didn't know what else pain Nagato would soon do to give them hope that the future wasn't lost. A mile away from Konohagakure no Sato, secluded cave, minutes later, Nagato had just finished the jutsu and had been laid down beside Naruto by Konan, who had to wipe at the tears that fell from her eyes. Coating her hand in green chakra, she bent beside Naruto Uzumaki and placed her hand just above his left eye. I hope you know what you're doing, Nagato, she told the body of her now deceased friend. Looking down at Naruto, she smiled slightly through the tears that wanted to fall. You'll become a strong man, Naruto-san. I'll do as Nagato wished and help you where I can. With one last sigh, she got to work on transplanting the eyes. 25 minutes later, Naruto had woken up a few seconds ago and came under onslaught of information, images and stuff he couldn't understand flying around his mind. Pain unlike anything he had ever felt stabbed at him in his mind, eyes, and even his body ached as if he'd been crushed under the Hokage mountain. Despite the intense pain, he could see jutsu flowing through his brain, how to use them, what they did, how much chakra they took, when to use them even. There were so many jutsu and yet he had no idea what they were, and yet he did as well. Was this what Nagato had meant? A part of him knows but the other is clueless. I swear to Kami, if this pain doesn't lessen I'm gonna use these, bring Nagato back and kick the living shit out of him. God, it feels like my eyes are on fire. I really am being given everything he knew, ninjutsu, genjutsu, taijutsu and even kenjutsu, thousands of books worth. I even know how to do all that. Whoa, information on the Sharingan, Byakugan and even Kekai Genkai from other villages. Maybe when this incessant pain stops, I can sort throughout everything, especially once my body stops aching all over. A sharp stab of pain spiked through his hand, forcing his hand to immediately grasp that part as his back arched from the ground. He absently noticed the feel of bandages wrapped around his eyes. So, what happened to Nagato? Before he could verbalize the question, the last moments of Nagato's life flashed through his mind in less than a second, as if telling him what he wanted to know. He brought everyone back. How? He sacrificed himself to repent and give me hope. I thought he was just dying. I never realized he was killing himself. The pain subsided for a moment. I promise, Nagato, I'll train to become strong, stronger than ever before. I'll learn to use these eyes of yours as if they had always been a part of me, which technically they always have since I now know what you know. Anyway, I won't let your sacrifice be in vain. I see you're awake. An angelic voice that he had come to know came from beside him. He felt soft, delicate hands tighten the bandage before brushing his locks of hair back and over the bandages. You've been out of it for over 20 minutes. You probably already know, but Nagato revived everyone in the village. He heard a choked sob and guilt welled up inside of him. Nagato's dead and you now have the Rinnegan. For a short while you'll experience much pain. Having so much knowledge inserted into your brain from the Rinnegan and having the same eyes merge with your chakra network, changing your DNA and physical body, it will eventually place you into a temporary coma. It may just be a day, in fact, depending on how fast those eyes work and how great your healing ability works as well. When you wake up again, you will have changed somewhat. You will be able to activate the Rinnegan or deactivate it at will. Unlike with Nagato, it won't be permanently active. I'll be helping you back to Konoha. As you are now, you won't be able to make it by yourself. I can't possibly imagine the pain you must be going through right now. Within a couple days that knowledge will be integrated with your mind. You will simply know everything. With that, you will become more powerful than you've ever been before. Naruto listened to everything with rapt attention, eyes closed so tightly that they burned stronger from the intense fire that seemed to coat them. Most likely the burning was from the chakra from the Rinnegan fusing with his chakra network as well as his healing restoring and merging his normal eyes with the dojutsu. No wonder Nagato had said being unconscious would be much better. He reached up with his hand, his trembling hand to grasp Kona's that had moved to his bandages again to fuss with them. "I'm sorry," was all he could say. There was nothing else one could say in such a moment. There were no cards for, "Sorry for taking your only friend's eyes and then him bringing all of my loved ones back at the cost of his life." Then, in a moment of weakness, he felt Conan's head drop to his chest as her entire body was racked with sobs. Tears soaked his chest, and it was now he realized he wasn't wearing his jacket anymore. Weakly he lifted other hand, unable to move anything else, and placed it on her head, on her blue hair that felt like silk, funnily enough. It was all the comfort he could offer as his own tears dripped from his burning eyes. Tears for a new friend, the death of one of the last two remaining Uzumakis, and more importantly the loss of a brother in arms. "I'm sorry." Konohagakure no Sato's forest. 5 minutes later, Naruto and Conan ambled through the forest, what was left of Konoha's forest, with some difficulty. Conan had one of her arms wrapped around his midsection and had placed his left arm over her shoulder and around her neck to keep him steady through the walk. Every now and again, he would grasp at his head, or flinch, grit his teeth and almost collapse under the onslaught of knowledge being shoved into his mind all at once. Conan had been able to see blots of red appearing on the bandages and could only guess it was tears of blood from the transplantation. After she had finished transplanting the eyes, she had stored Naruto's blue orbs and Nagato's body within a scroll preserve the two, since she wanted to bury Nagato properly and Naruto's eyes may be needed in the future. She winced for a moment as she heard a small whimper pass through Naruto's clenched teeth as he obviously tried to hold out against the pain. "How do you feel?" she asked quietly, not wanting to hurt his head, speaking louder. Naruto glanced at her with partially open eyes. He had been able to open his eyelids up slightly without receiving too much pain. What surprised him though was that he could see through the bandages, though everything was a mix of black and white, perhaps a bit of gray as well. In a way, being able to see through the bandages made him really realize he had been transplanted with the Rinnegan. Now if only the pain would stop. His bones felt like they were constantly breaking and rebuilding. Most likely his body was changing as Nagato said it would. It felt like his cells were burning away before instantly replaced with new ones, over and over and over again. Seeing Conan in a blurred image of black and white, he smiled slightly with a grimace. "Never. Better." He winced at the sound of pain he made in between talking. "We're almost there, Naruto-kun." Katsuyu's soft voice reached his ears as the slug on his right shoulder informed him. She had been slowly giving him chakra to heal him of his previous injuries, so what he was going through at the moment wouldn't get any worse. God forbid if they did. "All right," he acknowledged with a slight nod that brought on another bout of pain. Over the journey back, he had been able to see and even feel as information was uploaded to his brain from his new eyes. Even as his chakra network changed due to the Rinnegan's influence. So many jutsu had filtered through his brain, jutsu he had never dreamed of before, and yet he knew how to use them, knew the hand seals and what they did. It was honestly amazing. Strapped to his waist was the Zanpakuto, the sentient katana that he had received from his fellow clan member before his death. After a couple minutes of walking and pausing a couple of times to get his bearings, they had finally arrived at the large gates that had managed to survive the attack. Walking further in, still held up by Conan, they stopped just inside the gate as they came upon a scene that Naruto would have embedded in him for his entire life. Every villager, shinobi in hell he could swear there were animals, all of them were stood in a large gathering apparently waiting for him. "You did it, Naruto," shouted a shinobi. "Welcome home, Naruto," exclaimed a civilian girl. "You're a hero," cheered another shinobi. "We believed in you," cheered a section of ninja. "Thank you, Naruto," cheered more civilians. Naruto's mouth opened wordlessly, unable to say anything to express what it all meant to him. Against his will, tears of blood slid down his face at finally being acknowledged. A part of his dream was complete. The people of his home no longer hated him. Well, there probably will some, but seeing everyone gathered just for him and cheering loudly, he felt like he was at the top of the world. Until a stab of pain shot through his body, almost making him collapse. "Naruto," he heard a familiar voice shout. Looking up, he was able to just catch a bob of short hair. Unfortunately, seeing in black and white at the moment, he couldn't see the color, but he couldn't mistake that voice as he felt and saw a hand coated in chakra hovering over his eyes. "Sakura-chan," he whispered weakly. "Yeah," he heard, though this time her voice contained joy and sadness at the same time. "I don't know what you did, but everyone's alive. Kakashi-sensei is in a medical tent we managed to set up quickly. He had tried to come after you and bring you back, but his body was too damaged to do anything. I was going to come for you when Katsuyu explained to me about everything that had happened and your eyes." He felt her hand against his cheek as she lifted his head to see her shed some tears, and he realized he'd never seen her really cry, not for him anyway. "Are you sure this is the right thing to do?" Sakura had been terrified for her teammate and also the young man she was beginning to admit her growing feelings for. After hearing from Katsuyu that he was going to confront the real pain, she'd almost been given a heart attack, and remembering the look on everyone else's face at the time, she doubted she was alone in that one. Then not long after, everyone had been revived with Katsuyu explaining that Naruto had convinced Pain to believe in him, still shocking to her even now, and then that Naruto had accepted the power offered to him and what would happen. She hadn't wanted to believe it at first, knowing and understand just how much pain he'd be going through assimilating so much knowledge all at once and having his body change. Even now she could see he had gotten slightly taller, his hair had gotten longer, and if she was correct, there was red highlights appearing. She could also clearly see the dabs of red spots on the bandages, the dry blood tears down his cheeks, and it almost made her want to cry that he would go through so much to protect everyone. Naruto grasped her hand in one of his trembling ones. Even now, when he was in love to Mari and in a real relationship, his feelings for Sakura hadn't lessened at all. Though, he had a good idea that in the near future, with being the last of two clans, he would be forced into something that the council finally cooked up. He would definitely have to talk to Tamari soon. "I had no choice, Sakura-chan. With this I can protect everyone and bring peace to this world." He sighed, letting loose a shuddering breath. "I won't have to run from Akatsuki anymore. With these eyes, I'm already beginning to see more clearly now. All my mistakes, every wrong decision, I can make up for them now." "Naruto," Sakura whispered, temporarily ignoring the cheering from behind her and their friends coming up to them from seeing Naruto's state. "Come on, you baka, I've set up a medical tent for you." She gave a nod to Conan, still unsure of how to act around her, especially since she still wore the Akatsuki cloak. Naruto gave a small nod, barely feeling the pain anymore or anything in fact as he slowly slipped away to unconsciousness. However you say, he trailed off and Sakura knew he must be in a lot pain for him being okay with going to anything remotely like a hospital with no hassle. Though, seeing her teammate flinch and whimper, she couldn't imagine just how much pain he was in considering he could usually be dealt a lot of pain and walk away with his goofy grin. Konohagakure no Sato, Naruto's medical tent. 2 days later, Kakashi Hatake, Konohagakure Jonin, former student of the Yondaime Hokage, known worldwide for his use of the Sharingan, nicknamed Copy Ninja no Kakashi, Copy Ninja Kakashi, and Sharingan no Kakashi, Kakashi of the Sharingan, was currently stood at the entrance of Naruto's medical tent on the inside so he was able to see Naruto's current condition. As soon as he had awoken a day earlier, he had been debriefed by both Sakura and Konan, former Akatsuki member. He had obviously recognized her as soon as he saw her, but since he was the type to find answers before taking action, he listened to Sakura as she explained what had happened while he was unconscious. Pain bringing everyone back, which was a given since he was alive himself. Pain then giving Naruto the Rinnegan and everything the man knew. Obviously it was consensual as Konan had told them the Rinnegan would only accept Naruto as its wielder that way. The fact a dojutsu was practically sentient in the manner that it stored information in a sort of database, and would merge its own chakra with Naruto and changing his physique to how it should be, was scarier than he'd like to admit. It went to show that the Rinnegan was no simple dojutsu. They had told him Naruto had been in terrible pain after the transplantation from having the Rinnegan already merging with his chakra pathways and implanting all knowledge within Naruto. Konan had told him that on the way to the village, the Rinnegan had been active since Naruto could see through the bandaging but everything was black and white. That had reminded him of the Byakugan. However, when Naruto had blacked out after entering the village, they'd noticed that Naruto was healing faster than they or even pain, or was it Nagato now? Either way, they'd found he was healing faster than they'd predicted. The area around his eyes had healed, but nevertheless they kept the bandages wrapped around his eyes for precaution. Even to Konan the Rinnegan was a mystery, only Pain had understood it, meaning when Naruto awoke, he would too understand it. Then it came down to the business with the village itself. Letting out a weary sigh, he moved closer to Naruto's bed, where the blonde-haired young man lay, though he could see red highlights coming through. Leaning against a pole that held the tent up, he thought about what Shizune had soon explained to him. Tsunade-sama was in a coma from having used her Sozo Seisei, creation rebirth, to send her chakra into Katsuyu, allowing the Slug Queen to heal and keep the majority of the villager and shinobi alive. Then the Fire Daimyo had called for a meeting of the next Hokage since he couldn't place his trust in the belief that Tsunade may wake up. The only good thing, however, was that he had said he wouldn't begin the meeting until Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze had awoken. Clearly the man had been informed of just what Naruto had accomplished and that the young man would be awake any day, never mind the fact the man had said his last name, his real last name. Some part of Kakashi prayed that the Fire Daimyo wanted to wait for Naruto to wake to make him Hokage, since this was now the perfect chance for Danzo to finally make his move, and honestly, only Naruto would be able to take the position of Hokage. The village itself though was slowly picking up. The rebuilding was slow but making process, and after all it wasn't like they'd had to build it from scratch before. Konan herself had been standing guard over Naruto the entire time, and Kakashi had to respect the loyalty she displayed to Naruto, despite being enemies just 2 days earlier. Naruto, who was now the legacy of Minato Namikaze, his mother, Jiraiya, and now Nagato. Each one had left some part of them with Naruto, each in their own way for the young man to fulfill his dream and their own. Now though, as he looked down at Naruto, his student, pride unlike he'd ever felt before filled him. This young man of 16 had defeated a man that had killed him, Jiraiya-sama, and even Hanzo of the Salamander. He almost laughed at how insane it sounded. Nevertheless, this boy was still becoming stronger as he thought about him becoming stronger. The Rinnegan had finished changing his body so Naruto could use the jutsu he probably knew more efficiently like Nagato had. He could only imagine the library of jutsu his mind was at the moment. He would be able to use every element, and knowing Naruto, he would be able to use the sub-elements also, especially with just how the Uzumaki clan were distant relatives of the Senju. They may be distant, but they were relatives nonetheless. Naruto probably also knew the Namikaze clan's Kekkei Genkai, something Kakashi had always wanted to explain to Naruto, but seeing how the blonde hadn't grown as he should have, or even shown signs of activating it, he had pinned the blame on Kyuubi and the seal from stunting Naruto's growth like it had. And now finally, maybe he would see Naruto's true strength. Of course he knew the blonde was stronger than he'd shown. It wasn't just the fact that Jiraiya-sama had told him before he'd left for Omegakure, but it was the way Naruto held himself. He was confident in himself, in his power, and he always seemed to hold himself back in fights. He had wanted to tell Naruto he knew he was stronger than he'd shown, that Jiraiya-sama had also told him of his little escapades with a certain Kazekage's sister. Yes, Jiraiya-sama knew. He wasn't known as the best information gatherer for nothing. But for Naruto's sake the man had kept quiet. He may have been a pervert, but even he wouldn't tease Naruto or make fun of him about falling in love with Temari. From what Kakashi had been told by the former Sannin, Naruto had become a man a long time ago. After that information had been shared, they both had to smile with pride that Naruto had bagged one of the hottest kunoichi out there. Kakashi understood Naruto's reasons for keeping everything a secret, but he would have liked to talk about the boy he'd come to see as a son or maybe a nephew, about his personal life. Sighing, he decided not to lament on what could have been but rather what could be. He just hoped that despite Naruto becoming even more powerful, he would still hold an important place in his life. You have no idea how much you affect people. Sakura's changed from being a less talented kunoichi to one that could and most likely will become one of the strongest shinobi. Sigh. I may not have been in the same team as him as long as you, but for you to have changed someone like Sai to become loyal to you, even more so than Danzo, is incredible. Even Hinata now has almost stopped her stuttering. I don't know what happened when she stepped in between you and Pain, but Sakura told me that Hinata seemed more confident in herself now. You even changed Neji years back. Kiba's no longer as arrogant as he sued to be, though being from his clan, he's bound to show he's an alpha to get respect. Hey, even Ino is becoming stronger after seeing you use your Rasenshuriken. From what Inoichi told me, she had practically ordered him to teach her more of their family techniques. She learned medical ninjutsu from Sakura and Shizune while you were away leaning and mastering Senjutsu chakra. She may one day become one of the brightest kunoichi alongside Sakura. Lee, well, he has decided you're his rival. I'd laugh at that, but honestly, having Guy claim I'm his rival for as long as I can remember, I know the hardships that will befall you. Shikamaru actually works harder now. Choji is no longer the coward he once was. Tenten had always been a dedicated kunoichi, though I think when she sees your new sword, you'll have a new fan. Kakashi thought to himself, thinking of how the younger generation had changed. He was broken from any potential thoughts by the groan coming from the bed. Looking down sharply, he watched as Naruto, who was obviously now awake, slowly lifted a hand up to his bandage and felt it as if checking it was still there. The young blonde slowly pulled himself up into a seating position and stared down at his hands through the bandages. How long have I been out of it, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked, not even looking at him, which caused Kakashi to actually blink at him. You can see me? Kakashi asked. No. Naruto shook his head, clenching his fists as if testing they worked. I can sense your chakra beside me. He slipped a leg over the side of the bed and then another as he placed his hand on the edge and pushed himself up and stumbled slightly. Whoa, I feel different, he muttered as he pushed himself completely up, only wearing sweatpants. Kakashi actually stared in shock as he saw Naruto's new muscles actually ripple and flex along his skin. Holy crap, he's like Guy. Shaking his head he answered his student. You've been out for 2 days, a shorter time than what Conan had thought you'd be out of it. Conan, Naruto questioned, glancing back. She's still here then? Yes, seems like you've gained another follower. Kakashi smirked slightly. Naruto smiled and gave a short nod before heading to a mirror that had been placed in his tent. Good, I don't want her out of my sight, he said, surprising Kakashi. You don't trust her. I trust her, with my life even, Naruto assured his sensei. But, it worked. I know everything Nagato knew, jutsu, taijutsu, kenjutsu, hell, even the knowledge of all of the countries and lands. Basically, everything Nagato had seen, done or read, all up here. He tapped his head. Anyway, I'm worried about Conan. With what I know now, there are people, or rather a person, who will want to kill her for betraying him. He stood in front of the mirror. Who? Kakashi asked, realizing Naruto was basically a goldmine of Akatsuki information. The true leader of Akatsuki. Naruto answered with a weary sigh, sounding too old for his age. I want to tell you, Kakashi-sensei, but right now I can't. The village needs rebuilding. I need to work out the kinks of my new abilities. He reached up and grasped the edge of his bandages and began to unravel it. There's more happened in the village you don't know about, Naruto. Kakashi sighed heavily. Things are worse now, and frankly we need you. Naruto pulled off the rest of his bandages, revealing his usual bright blue eyes. His healing had restored them and he could feel the Rinnegan within them. With just a pulse of chakra and he could activate them, but it was too early to attempt that, especially in the village. He looked in the mirror and took note of his changes. He now stood at the full height of 6 feet 1 inch with blonde hair that held red highlights reaching just past his shoulders, while parts of his fringe shadowed his eyes. His whisker marks had vanished from his cheeks due to the changes of his body, but left minor traces of them behind. His body was more muscular, most likely to fit the needs of what he could now and what he would be able to do. His face was more rugged, gone was any baby fat, and in place was a younger version of his father, except a bit more muscular. He had to say though, he liked the red in his hair, but where did he get it from? Shrugging, he turned to Kakashi, his bandages hung around his fingers. What's happened? He asked, dreading the answers from the sigh that Kakashi let out. It's Tsunade-sama. Naruto's stomach dropped immediately. Nothing could happen to his Ba-chan, it just couldn't. She was all he had left when it came to people he looked to for advice, apart from Kakashi and Yamato, that is. But Tsunade, she was the only reason he hadn't upped and left the village from the treatment he had received before he started getting praised. She was the one that he would go to for some advice about life. Nobody knew, but he had confided in her about his relationship with Temari. He'd been afraid of a long-distance relationship and he knew she knew he could do more since Jiraiya had to tell her. Not that he was angry at the man. In fact, it made it easier for him. She'd been the one to suggest communicating with summons. She'd been the one to make sure no one disturbed Temari or him when she'd been in the village after he'd returned. Losing her now, it would shatter him. She's fallen into a coma. She used her unique jutsu to give all of her chakra to Katsuyu. She saved the majority of the village, and I know it may not mean anything, but she did the Hokage's job. Kakashi looked at Naruto to see him angrily push against the temple, willing tears away. But when I left, she was fine. Naruto shook his head and gazed at Kakashi, his blue eyes flashing a light purple, his Rinnegan for a second before going back to blue. It was barely noticeable. I won't begin to understand your connection with Tsunade-sama, Naruto. But, when you left to fight Pain, Nagato, Naruto corrected. Call him Nagato. Pain was a mask. Kakashi gave a nod in acceptance. Nagato. Tsunade was forced to drop her genjutsu and reverting to her true form. Currently, she has barely any chakra within her. You should be proud of her, Naruto. Years ago she would have never dreamed of saving Konoha until she met you. While you may not like what had happened, she did her duty. She protected lives ahead of her own. She did what she could to protect her home. Kakashi explained with sorrow at what had happened to their Hokage. Naruto grit his teeth. He didn't like what had happened, but she was Hokage, it was her duty after all. Kakashi was right though. She never would have saved the village and its people before he'd met her, and what would have happened if he hadn't brought her back? Would everyone still be dead? Who on earth would be Hokage? Danzo. The very thought made him shudder in disgust. I understand, I'll visit her when I can. What else is there? He asked. Without a Hokage in the village, someone would no doubt be selected. Well, that was the first topic. Second, the Raikage has called for a summit, and I will be frank as to the importance of this summit at another time. However, you should know that this summit will be a convening of the 5 cages, from Iwa, Kumo, Hiri, Suna, and of course, Konoha. Kakashi explained. They had received the letter earlier that day actually, and it had mentioned about a team of 3 shinobi being sent their way with vital information. I see. Naruto nodded. But, we have no Hokage, right? Right. This brings us to the last topic. Since there is no Hokage, the daimyo has ordered for a meeting to take place to decide who will be Tsunade-sama's successor. He held up a hand to stop Naruto from speaking. I know what you're thinking, but at times like these, even I agree we can't wait for her to wake up. Right now, we're vulnerable, more vulnerable we've ever been. The daimyo has requested that the meeting be held off until you wake up. The meeting will be between you, the daimyo, and the council of Konoha. Me? Naruto questioned, confused. Yes, it would appear that the daimyo somehow has knowledge of your heritage and of your defeat of Nagato. Honestly, I don't know what he wants you there for, whether it's because right now the village sees you as its hero or the fact you're probably stronger than anyone in the village now, especially with the gift from Nagato, I couldn't say. Naruto gave a nod to what his sensei had said. He wouldn't brag and say he was the strongest, but he knew once he got the hang of the Rinnegan and the repertoire of jutsu and everything he has now, he would be pretty damn formidable. Especially since he doesn't have the drawbacks that Nagato had from sharing his abilities amongst bodies, instead he held each and every power. When will the meeting be? He queried. He wanted to see Ba-chan as soon as possible. I'll have to go see the daimyo and let him know you're awake. He was the one who requested me to check up on you and report back to him. In the meantime you should go stretch your legs and see Tsunade-sama. She's currently in her personal tent just down the way. I think Sakura, Ino and Shizune were looking over. Kakashi told him as he lifted the curtain at the door to step through. And Naruto, I'm sure Jiraiya would proud of you. Naruto gave him a smile and nod as Kakashi left. Naruto looked back to the mirror, admiring his new looks and inwardly hoping Temari didn't mind the change. Though he knew she wasn't the shallow type of girl to simply fall out of love because he looked slightly different, well older he'd say, and without being arrogant he would have to say he even looked more handsome. So, Ba-chan is in a coma, the Raikage has requested a summit of the 5 cage, I wonder what's up with that for him to take such an action all of a sudden. And now the daimyo is here to select a new Hokage. No matter what, I can't let Danzo take the position. With the knowledge I now possess, I can show Danzo for what he really is. He thought to himself, assessing everything that he'd been informed of. He looked over to his bed and saw his new katana, or rather his zanpakuto, stood up against it. Walking over to it, he grasped the handle of it and sighed. This sword was the only connection he now had to his mother's home village. Well, he guessed it was his mother's village since his father had been born in Konoha, concluding his mother's name was Uzumaki, something that gave him some peace of mind. What did you call yourself again? Ah, Hirenmaru, is that it? He tried to communicate to the sword since it had spoken through his mind once before. Nothing came through though, making him sigh. Maybe he wasn't ready to use it to its full power yet. He knew sentient weapons were always more than just a metal blade, usually they had abilities and even a mind of their own. Take Samahata for instance, a sword that absorbed chakra and only allowed Kisame Hoshigaki to use it. Zabuza Momochi's Zanbeitu, Kubikiribocho, decapitating carving knife, would repair itself by absorbing the blood of its enemies. Who knows how many more weapons were out there like that. But despite being cut off from his own sword, he could tell it held great power, especially if it was as old as Nagato had said. Looking back at the mirror across from him, he tried to access the Rinnegan but got nothing more than a mere flicker of his eyes changing color for a brief second, a very brief second. I guess it's like the Sharingan in the way it will only activate in a certain situation. Despite it being from some who had activated it permanently, it must be because it's new to me, and since it's sentient as well, it must be waiting for the right moment before it grants me the ability to use it. He concluded to himself. Shrugging, he decided that at the moment he didn't need to worry about it. He could still use all the other jutsu he now knew for the many elements, and even though he could use the dojutsu, he knew he could use all the elements now and even sub-elements. It was kind of strange to him when he thought about it. Knowing new jutsu and even knowing he already knew how to use it was a little confusing, but he had no doubt over time he would get used to it. It was Nagato's memories though that was weird. While he had first though Nagato's and his own memories would merge, it wasn't that case. Unlike his jutsu and other abilities he could now do, which were in fact merged with the knowledge of what he could already do, giving the impression he had always used them, etc. The memories were completely different. He could almost picture two doors within his mind, the primary one that held his own memories, always accessible to him, and a secondary door behind that one, the one he could open up and pick all kinds of things from the door, including the knowledge of the Namikaze Kekkai Genkai. He closed his eyes as he felt a rush of information download into his mind. Jinten. Swift release. Naruto gave name to the Kekkai Genkai passed down amongst the Namikaze. The same one that allowed his father to come up with the idea, create and master the Hiraishin. When he had spoken with his father, which still felt strange to call the Yondaime such a thing, the man had told him that the Hiraishin was a technique only his blood could learn, and one day he hoped Naruto would learn it eventually. He hadn't understood at first, but now, he understood. It was only a technique a Namikaze could learn. Jinten ninjutsu were techniques that could be used to move at virtually instantaneous speed, granting the user an advantage over opponents with greater strength. It was like an upgraded version of the Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique, and then the Hiraishin came afterwards. The Hiraishin, though, he could now understood how it worked. By using the Kekkai Genkai Jinten and Kuchio's no Jutsu, summoning technique, which revolved around manipulation of time and space rather than accelerated movement, it allowed his father and hopefully someday himself to, instead of bring something to them, it allowed them to be sent somewhere else. Many would say that it was basically just the opposite of Kuchio's no Jutsu to sending themselves somewhere, but upon arriving at that spot, the user would need some technique of Kekkai Genkai that involved some sort of speed to land safely without any damage and to actually survive the journey and not be torn apart from the inside mid-sending. He still had a long way to go before he become the shinobi he would one day be. He had much jutsu to learn, or rather get himself comfortable with, since he had technically learnt them. He had to access his Namikaze Kekkai Genkai and now his transplanted Kekkai Genkai. Never mind, he had to communicate with his sword somehow. Sighing once more, he looked over to the corner of the tent where there were clothes folded up and decided to get changed and get out of the tent he had spent the past 2 days unconscious. He needed to see the state of Ba-chan before he could truly believe it. And it was finally time he stopped playing the dumb card. It was time he revealed who he really was from now on.